All right, today we're diving into a surgical procedure that's been a total game changer for one of the toughest injuries older folks can face. It's called a reverse shoulder replacement. And yeah, it sounds pretty out there, but you're going to see why this radical fix might just be the best solution for a really, really tricky problem.
So, let's just picture it. Your mom, your dad, your grandparent, they take a fall and end up with a really bad break right at the shoulder. It's painful, it's scary, and everyone's asking the same question. What do we do now? What's the best way to get them back to, just living their life and using their arm?
And here's the thing. This injury, called the proximal humerus fracture, isn't just super common. For years, it's been the source of a massive debate among orthopedic surgeons. When the break is really bad, there just hasn't been one clear, best answer. Well, that might be changing. Okay, so let's dig into the problem itself. Because to really get why the solution is so smart, you first have to understand just how common and how complex this break really is.
Get this, it's the third most common fracture in the elderly. The third! And with people living longer and staying active, we're only going to see more and more of these injuries. It's a huge and growing issue.
Now look, if it's a simple, clean break, a lot of the time you can just pop it in a sling, let it heal on its own, and things turn out fine. But that's not what we're talking about. The real headache, the source of all the debate, is when the bone is shattered into a bunch of pieces. That's when surgeons have been at a crossroads for a long, long time.
And at this crossroads, you find a few very, very different paths you can take.
So, here are the main options. You've got the non-surgical route. Just wait and see. Then there's something called ORIF, which is basically where a surgeon goes in with plates and screws and tries to piece the bone back together like a puzzle. After that, you're into replacements. You can replace just the ball part of the joint, that's a hemiarthroplasty, or you can do the one we're here to talk about, the reverse shoulder arthroplasty, the RSA.
So let's get to the star of the show. What on earth is a reverse shoulder replacement? And why is it shaking up the whole field for these really nasty fractures?
Okay, the definition says it all right there. You're reversing the natural anatomy. So normally, the ball is on your arm bone, and the socket is on your shoulder blade. In a reverse procedure, the surgeon literally flips that. They switch them.
But here's the really brilliant part, the why. Why to this? Well, by flipping the ball and socket, you completely change the physics of the shoulder. You create a new, super stable center of rotation. This lets the deltoid muscle, that big, strong muscle on the outside of your shoulder, take over the work of lifting the arm. It completely bypasses the small, delicate rotator cuff muscles that are almost always torn in these big injuries. It's like an ingenious electrical rewiring of the shoulder.
So the design is clever, no doubt about it. But how does it actually perform? How does it stack up against those other surgical options when you look at the hard data? Let's check it out. First, let's put it head-to-head with just replacing half the joint, the hemiarthroplasty. And honestly, it's not even close. Study after study shows a clear winner. Patients who get the reverse procedure have better motion, they score higher on function tests, and they're just happier with the result. It's why using a hemi for fractures is really falling out of favor.
And if you need one number to really drive this home, look at this. This comes from a huge registry in Australia that tracks thousands of patients. The chance you'll need another surgery within 9 years is only 7% for a reverse. For the hemi, it's almost 12%. That is a huge difference in how long these things last. Okay, but what about fixing the bone with plates and screws? A landmark study called the Delphi trial looked at this directly. They took elderly patients and randomly gave them either the reverse surgery or the fixation. 2 years later, the results were pretty shocking. On a 100-point scale for how well the shoulder works, the reverse group scored a 68. The group with plates and screws, only a 54. But this is the real kicker. It's not just about how well the shoulder works. Nobody wants to go back for another surgery, right? Well, that SEAM study found that patients who got their bones fixed with plates and screws were almost 3 times more likely to need another operation, a 14% reoperation rate versus just 5% for the reverse. The evidence really suggests the reverse is a more reliable, one-and-done kind of fix.
So, we've established that the reverse procedure is a real heavy hitter, but the research also tells us something else. The little details matter. How and when you do the surgery can be the difference between a good result and a fantastic one. So, let's look at the keys to success.
So here's one of the biggest debates. Is it better to rush in and do the surgery right away, or should you wait, see if it heals okay on its own, and only operate later if things go wrong?
Well, a huge analysis of all the data gives us a very clear answer. Doing the surgery acutely, meaning soon after the injury, leads to way fewer problems. Complications are lower, and look at that re-operation rate. It's 3 times lower if you do it early. The evidence really points toward getting it done sooner rather than later.
Okay, here's another detail that surgeons obsess over. See, when the shoulder shatters, these little bony bumps where the rotator cuff tendons attach, they're called the tuberosities, they often break off. The big question is, does it matter if you can get them to heal back in place?
And the answer is absolutely yes. The reverse design is so good it can work even if they don't heal. But the studies are crystal clear. When surgeons can get those little bony bumps to heal back to the implant, the results are just superior. You get better motion, especially rotating your arm out, and higher function overall. It's really the final piece of the puzzle to get the best possible outcome.
So, we've looked at the problem, the design, and the data from every angle. What's the final verdict here? Where does the reverse shoulder replacement stand for these awful fractures?
Let's just break it all down. Who's it for? The evidence points to elderly patients, usually over 65, with those really severe shattered fractures. Is it better than fixing the bone? For this group, yes. Better function, fewer re-ops. Is it better than replacing just half the joint? Absolutely. Better function, and it lasts longer. And what's the secret sauce for success? Do the surgery early and get those tuberosities to heal.
And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. The experts who wrote a major review on this just this year put it perfectly. They said reverse shoulder arthroplasty has emerged as a successful surgical solution for what used to be a problem with no good answers.
And that really brings us to the final thought here. With surgeons getting better at this and the implants themselves constantly improving, this procedure's only going to get more reliable. So the question isn't really if this works anymore. The question is, could this once radical reverse idea become the absolute, undisputed gold standard for fixing these breaks? All the evidence seems to be pointing in that direction.